Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian Show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today we have guests, Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you all, as always. And Ivan Kucherenko from Kiev, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Nice to see you. Hello.
Yeah. Okay, so today's top news, of course, it's what's happening in Kakhovka, and you have a video that we could see right now. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Let's start with that.
От заборов не только лишь макушка, причем самую макушку.
What a devastation. It's, while I was watching that, I was thinking about really what's going on with Putin's mind. Because by 2014, when he annexed Crimea and got controls over Donbass region, Lugansk and Donetsk, at that time, Ukrainian army was not capable of resisting to Russian armies of Mr. Putin. And therefore, he's got the best of whatever he could. He wanted to take Crimea because he believes that historically it's a part of Russia and was always belonged to Russia. And Khrushchev made a mistake by giving it to Ukraine. Okay, fine. Then he said that he wants to defend Russians in Donbass and Lugansk regions. Nobody attacked them, but anyway, he feeling that Ukraine cannot do anything about it, and at that time Obama was in the office, so he wouldn't resist either, so they could actually very easily take it. Now, the problem I think happened is when you win the war, you want to have some kind of a treaty, a new agreement, or something like whether Versailles or any other stuff, which would engrave it in stone your victory. So Putin believes that he's got a victory, at least in Donbass and in Crimea, and he wanted to have so-called Minsk 1, Minsk 2, Minsk 3, Minsk 55 to finally engrave it into some kind of a law or some kind of agreement, and that all failed. In spite of the fact that he was trying to influence Zelensky any way he could, he even arranged that Yermak took Zelensky to Oman to meet with Russian KGB's people and all his influencers or so on. And they very softly, they didn't press Zelensky, but they softly explain who is who, what is what, who is Yermak, where he should be, or so on. Now Yermak, as you know, he's on a list of 53 people of United States who have to be immediately removed from the power in Ukraine. Now, they said that, okay, you can do it now, you can do it right after the war will be over. But it has to be done because right now all administration of Zelensky is being controlled by Yermak, whether we love it or not, but that's a fact of life. And Yermak is most likely Russian operative. But okay, we will live with that, and once the war will be over, all these people will be accountable for what they've done. But let's wait with that. That's not so important. So once Zelensky, after all these manipulations, refused to sign Minsk III, I think at the time, then it was signal for Putin that the deal is not done. So that only can be achieved through war. There are no other means, in his opinion, that could be achieved. So now, 250,000 people are dead on both sides. The Ukraine is being destroyed on a daily basis. Russia is being destroyed. Now, the good thing about all that is that Russia is going to lose its territory. And Ukrainians are going to do exactly what Putin did in Donbass 9 years ago. So what they will do, they will take, for example, Belgorod region, control it, ask for a referendum. Referendum will vote to get out of Russian Federation, create Belgorod People's Republic, and then Belgorod People's Republic will ask Ukraine that it wants to join Ukraine. And that's going to happen later with Kursk region and with Rostov region and many others. So Russia now will actually test its own medicine. Thank God. And it's brilliant because it also takes their power, the war power, from the regions where Ukrainians are going to start its offensive. Ivan, what's happened with Ukrainian offensive? What's in your opinion it's doing now?
It's preparing, and actually the destruction of Kakhovka Dam was an attempt of Russian side to postpone this offensive, at least in the Kherson region, where Russian positions were quite weak. And I just want to stop more on this another evidence of Russian war crime, of Russian atrocity, because it's a very huge disaster for Ukraine. More than 80 villages and towns are being flooded and destroyed. A lot of animals, rare animals, a lot of industries are destroyed, and the consequences of this disaster are similar to the explosion of the nuclear bomb. Actually, Russia committed another act of mass destruction, a technical catastrophe, and I think that the reaction of the United States, of the Canada, of Western countries should be severe, because just imagine the situation if Al-Qaeda, for instance, captured the Hoover Dam in the United States and destroyed it in order to flood some part of United States. This actually is the similar situation. Russian captured Kakhovka Dam, they controlled it, and they destroyed it in order to stop the Ukrainian offense. Luckily, this attempt will not stop Ukrainian offense, and I hope that
it will be delayed, maybe for a few days.
I think not even be delayed, because
The Ukrainians could just simply pause, go on the defensive temporarily in that area while they reconsolidate, and they will simply put greater effort into the areas of their offensive where they're experiencing more success and where the Russians can't really resist them. So yeah, the
Yeah,
Ukrainians have shown they're very adaptable.
I've seen a comment of one of Ukrainian commanders, and actually the possibility of Kakhovka Dam being destroyed was considered since the last year, since the liberation of Kherson region, because our military command considered that Russians will destroy Kakhovka Dam when they will retreat to the left bank of the Dnieper, but they didn't destroy it at that time. But that possibility was quite high, so they considered this possibility that they will destroy the Kakhovka Dam in order to delay the Ukrainian offense. And according to the command of the representative of Ukrainian command, that will not affect the Ukrainian attack. But I hope that the reaction of the civilized world and the consequences of this another war crime of Russia will be very severe for Russia, and probably United States will at least provide us with ATACMS long-range missiles in order for Ukraine to punish Russia for their atrocity, because Russia can be punished only by power, only on the battlefield right now.
But they have their own battlefield even in their own country. I've seen a lot of sociology research groups. They're stopping people randomly on the streets of Moscow, and they're asking, are you going to vote in next year's president's election? They said, some said yes, some said yes, once we will know who are the nominations. And there were like 20 people, only one said that he would vote for Putin. And several others said that either they will not vote, or they will be able to answer these questions once they will know who are the other nominations. And a few people said that they will vote for anybody but Putin. And now let's see what's happened in Belgorod. So the latest, what I'm searching a lot of different sites, trying to figure out really what's going on. And from what I've heard specifically from Tsvitan, he's a very good military analyst who actually participated in the war back in 2014 against Russians or so on. Now he's saying is that the idea of Belgorod is not only to get some troops from the front lines to deal with this Belgorod situation, so there will be less people left on the front line, Russian. But it's much bigger than that. In fact, they want to take complete control of complete Belgorod Oblast, name it as a Belgorod Narodная or People's Republic, have a referendum to get out of Russian Federation, and then if they elect, ask Ukraine to get it into the Ukrainian Republic, or they will stay independent, at least for now, for time being. Jonathan, what do you think about this plan? We never discussed that as a real possibility, not even fantastic possibility, but it's happening right now. We cannot ignore it, right?
Well, we certainly can't ignore it. We can't afford to. But there, at least in a larger sense, we can probably safely assume that the U.S. intelligence community has looked at the possibility of some sort of internal disintegration of the Russian Federation, and this movement in Belgorod would be a symptom of that. Yeah, there may be other oblasts or other sections of Russia that are looking at this, and they're probably looking at how successful Belgorod's effort will be. before they themselves decide to undertake any kind of, shall we say, secession movement. And so right now it's sort of a wait and see thing. That we aren't necessarily prepared. The West is not necessarily prepared to instantly go to the aid of Belgorod, but they are certainly alert to the possibility of further disintegration within the Russian Federation, and to be prepared for that. So that simply reinforces the necessity for the West to support Ukraine's efforts to repel the Russian invasion, to contain the Russian Federation, and to allow the processes of internal disintegration to continue.
Jonathan, I think there could be consequences in a complete Eastern military doctrine of United States and Pentagon and NATO and all Western countries, because here it's necessary to understand that the cradle of Slavic nations is Kiev, a place of today's Ukraine. All what Moscow came to power and brought to this so-called Slavic development nation is Asia, Mongols, Turks, and all these Asian elements. So now a victory of Ukraine would mean that the Slavic civilization come back to its cradle, Kiev, Ukraine. And Kiev, Ukraine will become a center of all former Soviet republics. They will cling to Kiev, not to Moscow, because Moscow loses any credibility, any the notions developed by the West in the last 50, 60 years that Soviet Union is a second world power. Sometimes they would say, no, it's not second, it's equal to United States power. It's this and that, and there are red lines, and we cannot touch this, and we are afraid of that. All this going to garbage just as we speak. They have no army left. They cannot fight. They have no generals. They have nothing. Now, any country, never mind Turkey or Israel, never mind Ukraine, any of these countries can defeat Russia easily several times over and over and over. Russia cannot fight. It's kaput. It's finished. It's done. And Ukrainian army will demonstrate it. So where all these Western strategists and philosophers and politicians who made all their statements for the last 60, 70 years, they have to completely reinvent themselves. They have to come to a new reality. I hope it's already happening, but ever slowly. But it is. Jonathan, what's your opinion on that?
Well, old perceptions die hard. They really do, and it is George, as I say, George Kennan at the beginning of the Cold War was more prescient than all of these people when he formulated what became our grand strategy of containment, which worked so well during the Cold War. Kennan recognized that it was not necessary for the West to militarily defeat or conquer or occupy the former Soviet Union. All he had to do was simply contain, prevent them from expanding, prevent them from attaining through subversion or military conquest what they could not otherwise do through ideological example or so-called revolutionary processes. If all they had to do was contain them for long enough, and that the former Soviet Union would disintegrate, would buckle under the internal stresses of its own internal contradictions. The events of history have proven that Kennan was right. And he is still right in the sense of the current situation. We do not have to militarily defeat or conquer Russia in order to frustrate it or enable its destruction. Its destruction is contained within the seeds of its own internal contradictions. And so that all we have to do is simply resolutely support the efforts of nations like Ukraine and others that would be inclined to align with Ukraine and secede from Russia, and keep that up and create that bulwark in the form of Ukraine joining NATO, and present that solid front to the Russian Federation, and the process of disintegration within the Russian Federation will continue. It's as simple as
Um,
that. However,
wouldn't
go
that,
ahead.
no, I wanted to ask you, wouldn't be that a great time for Japan to assert its claims for Sakhalin and
Well,
for
yes.
islands?
Well, to be honest, yes, they could do that, and it's interesting that it's it would be a bit of a stretch for Japan to join NATO, but yeah, there is certainly no mechanism preventing Japan from becoming an associate ally of NATO or having
But there is,
bilateral agreements. Go ahead.
but wasn't there recently announced the war treaty between U.S., Australia, Japan, and South Korea?
Oh yes,
Yeah, so that could be a mechanism to
that
use.
that's a mechanism for bilateral cooperation between the two alliances. There
And
is nothing that
also
prevents
then
that.
the next could be moved Germans with their claim for Kaliningrad, the former and the
Oh,
real
that
name
now that
is
now there would be a
Königsberg.
certain delicious irony in that.
It's a Königsberg for centuries, but
Yeah,
however, Russian had nerve to change name to Kaliningrad and have it as a Russian city, which has no borders with Russia. So the
right.
train have to travel through Lithuania, and they have to be locked. So people cannot get out of their train until such time as it will reach the Russian Federation. So if all that would magically start all in one day, Ivan, how do you think Mr. Putin would he really become a busy man?
I think he will be dead by this moment, and his death is coming very quickly. And I agree totally with Jonathan and with you that Russia launched the process of its disintegration by inviting by committing a full-scale invasion to Ukraine last year. But all this story actually it started not in 2014, like you said in the beginning. Actually, this story started in 2008 when Russia invaded Georgia, not a state but a country in the Middle Asia, and the reaction of world leaders when Russia invaded the sovereign state first time, and their tanks were 20 kilometers from the Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, was so weak that Putin understood that it is possible for him to do even more invasions, like annexing Crimea in 2014 and like full-scale invasion to Ukraine in 2022. So this process started actually that time, and unfortunately, Russia had enough time to prepare for this war. Luckily, thanks to Russian corruption and um, their internal culture of stealing and bribing, they've stole more money than they've used to invest in their military forces. Otherwise, their army could actually be the second most powerful army in the world. Now their second army in Ukraine, like Blinken said.
Ivan, you missed another important event in 2008. It was an event when Ukraine and Georgia were denied by Germany and France the possibility to join NATO. These two countries, they immediately, it was still very far-fetched liking of Ukraine and Georgia, or one of them even joining NATO at that time. But at least if they would say, okay, here's what has to be done, here's a roadmap. It will take you 25 years to join NATO, but here where you start, that's what you do, or whatever. No, you will not be able to join NATO. Based on what? Based on what? These are independent countries. At that time, they were not in a state of war. So, if they would apply to join NATO, okay, some country would agree, some country would not, but outright say, don't even bother with your application. You will not be admitted to NATO. This is very callous, and of course, you must understand that both France and Germany at the time, they were obviously Putin's friends, and they were trying all accommodate and appease Putin any way possible, and that's policy war the same thing until 2014. And even then, after annexation of Crimea and Donbass region, only then they started to talk about some sanctions and some other stuff, but still very insignificant and didn't mean much, really. Today, it means a lot. When I was watching today the French Open tennis tournament, and there was a match between Svitolina, Ukraine, and Sabalenka from Belarus. They finished their match, and as usually custom is to shake hands, and Sabalenka was there, and Svitolina just walked by, didn't even look at her, didn't shake her hand, and went farther. So Sabalenka, you may argue that what she has to do with that personally, she's nobody, but she is intelligent enough to understand why that happened, and not she did not resist it. She took it as it is. Well, it's a wartime, and all these niceties, unfortunately, are out of place today. Jonathan, do you agree with this?
Oh yes, the
Yeah.
yeah, it's really a very difficult situation for uh, Ukraine to navigate and to understand that these other nations are trying to make trade-offs and they're trying to hedge their bets against uncertainty. But now there is a lot less reason for the other members of NATO not to fully support Ukraine, and because the aggression is unequivocal, and there is no question about who the aggressor is here. And
Yeah,
so
and war
now it's just a
crimes,
matter,
everything.
and there are war crimes, and the latest incident with the Kakhovka Dam, that's going to make it's going to make economic recovery for Ukraine more challenging. Obviously, it's going to mean a greater burden and a longer time before Ukraine attains full economic recovery. It's not impossible. It's just more challenging, and it's unfortunate that Russia is choosing to make things more difficult, not only for other nations, but for itself in the long run.
I think one way of Russia to avoid reparations or compensation or whatever you want to call it is to disintegrate in several small countries. And in this way, they will avoid, at least for the time being, their full responsibility. But slowly but surely, it will be in proportion to each region. It will be applied their portion of compensation and reparations or so on. Actually, Russians, they hate the word reparation. They prefer to call it compensation, but not reparation. Reparation is a horrible word, because reparation means the losing side pays money to the winning side. That's what reparation is. So they just please don't call it reparation, call it compensation. Okay. Well, we'll see which version will prevail. In the meantime, I would like to thank you for today's program, and I'm looking forward to see you on Friday, same place, same time. And I hope we'll have some really good, really positive news. Thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.
Slava
you.
Ukraini.
Героям слава.